And today, again, I will be our presenter. So I am Carla. I am one of the co-founders of Small Business Solver. My background actually is in strategy with my undergrad at Wilfrid Laurier and my supply chain management MBA from UBC. It's kind of a perfect storm for us today because I know a lot of people ask questions about being efficient in their strategic planning. So we are going to mix both strategy as well as how to be efficient in our execution of our strategy. So basically, this is the best time of year to be doing strategic planning. And really the reason it is that this is the time of year that, you're just ramping things up. You might have been relaxed over the holidays. And strategic planning requires a different type of mindset. It requires a relaxed, creative, open mind. So to do strategic planning right now really is the perfect time of year. Figure out when is the best time for you to be at your best in terms of ideas. My own personal one is running. I love jogging. That's when I think the best. That's when I really iron out a lot of my strategy. I get home from my run and I write it down. But you have to figure out when are you the best at being creative and being nonlinear in your thinking. So you've probably heard this all from your mentors and your coaches, that strategic planning, really if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And we are going to talk a little bit about this, but more so is that it's all about execution. So although we are going to talk about strategic planning today, really it's better to have a good strategy with great execution than a great strategy with bad execution. Regardless, we can all agree that it's never good to have a bad strategy. So today we're going to talk about how to have a good strategy and get us off to a good start. So jumping into this, why strategic planning? Basically, it's good to spend time to do your strategy because multitasking really actually is not a best practice. When you're doing multiple things, you're not being efficient. One example that I'll give you is that when I first started my business, so in the first 6 months of operating, I actually saved non-critical emails until the end of the week because often they resolved themselves or they were distracting me from the work that I had to accomplish from my 9 to 5. And so really to save them up until the Friday or once I had accomplished all my strategic tasks and important tasks for the week, I cleaned them out in about 2 hours. Whereas if I had actually responded to emails as they came into my inbox, non-critical, of course, non-critical. If I had done it that way, it might have taken me 5 hours, definitely twice as long as when I just did it at the end of the week. And at the same time, I didn't leave people waiting. By the end of the week, they got a response to the non-critical emails. So next, being tactical versus strategic takes a different mindset. And we already covered that. Is really to be tactical, you have to be focused, logical, and very organized. Versus being strategic, it takes creativity, being open-minded, a little bit more nonlinear. It's very easy to get stuck into tactical tasks. Again, the example here would be the email that pops up, a bill that arrives, a phone call, things like that, not really strategic, but they're really easy to be sucked into. So it's nice to take some time at the get-go. And finally, strategic planning, if you don't have a goal that you're trying to reach, it's almost impossible to reach it. It's just like if you're driving along and you don't plan to go anywhere, you're probably not going to end up where you wanted to. So what to expect today? First, we're going to start with the vision. So does your company have a vision? If it does, great. Make sure that it follows some of these best practices. If you don't have one, you'll have one by the end of today. Next, create your bite-sized pieces. So that's turning your vision into something that's actually actionable. And finally, you know what, it's great to come up with your strategy, but if halfway through the year it's not working, how do you monitor that and tweak that? So jumping into it, the vision. Really, a company's vision should be a combination of external opportunities and your internal strengths. And that helps you figure out what you're naturally competitive at and what direction that you should be going into. So how do you actually figure this out? First, you want to take a look outside of your own business, your own organization, and look around at what's happening in the world. The typical way to do this is the acronym PEST, P-E-S-T. And what this stands for is political, economic, social, and technology. But when you start thinking about the external environment with PEST, you're able to say, hey, this is something that's new and different that I see coming maybe late 2012 and now early 2013 as changes. For instance, if we start with the P, that would be any government policies, any changes. So as we know, government usually has their budget in April. We usually have our year ends in April. Changes start coming through in April. So really what we're looking forward to is, do we think there's going to be any changes? If you're in the solar panel industry, there's been lots of changes. Almost every 6 months there's a different change. So staying on top of government policy definitely should impact your strategy. Next, economic. Obviously in 2008, everyone was worried about depression. Some organizations actually adopted the fact that there was a depression, the fact that there was a recession. How does that impact their strategy? If you think about places like HomeSense and Winners, a new product line that they brought out in 2008 was actually pets. The pet industry is very robust against economic ups and downs. So fashion, such as Winners, which does have its downs during a depression, they were able to even out their revenue streams by definitely focusing on expanding into a product line that's more stable during a depression. Another example now would be there's definitely a bigger focus on growth. Obviously, things could change again, but this is something that, okay, there's more growth, there's more opportunity. People are willing to take more risks. You might be able to make partnerships with bigger organizations you weren't able to do before. Social. How are things changing? One great example would be online dating. A couple of years back, I guess it would be a decade now, is that people were using internet more. People were finding it harder to meet people. Online dating was an entire industry that came out of that opportunity. And that opportunity, again, from changes in the environment. And the final one to look at that might impact you, and probably definitely does impact you because you're on this webinar, is technology. What are the changes in technology? Clearly, there's more for less cost now. There's so many software as a service options. There's so many new technologies that are on the forefront. Everyone has their own smartphone now. How does that impact your business? So if you start thinking about the external, the second thing that you want to think about is your internal. On the internal side, you want to think about your own personal strengths, especially if you're a solopreneur. So if you're a one-man operation, what are your own personal strengths and your own business's strengths? If you have a larger business, thinking about the total history that you have, maybe some of your past clients that you have. What are your strengths? And then take your jog, play racquetball, maybe take your dog for a walk, whatever it is, and think about your opportunities and your strengths and figure out where they actually mix. Based on that, you come up with your natural competitive advantage. And the way that works is that you're able to come up with where they overlap and where you have a significant advantage. And so what you would really want to do is see, okay, so let's say Small Business Solver. How did it actually come out? Well, in 2008, most people were actually thinking about self-employment because there were not as many opportunities. And on the flip side, myself, I had a teaching background, and I had a business background, and I had my MBA in efficiency. So I worked with another individual, Con, who had his own IT company, and the combination of our own personal strengths and changes in the industry and opportunities out there came up with what our natural competitive advantage would be. When you have those two components, what you now want to do, understanding what your toolkit is figure out what we like to call is your BHAG. And your BHAG is your big, hairy, audacious goal. And your big, hairy, audacious goal is basically based on the opportunities and your own personal strengths, where do you see yourself in the next 3 years? And that's only if you're a startup. So a startup can say, in the next 3 years, this is where I see myself being. This is your vision. If you're a small business, which is more than just a startup, you can think on the outside of 5 years, but you definitely can't go beyond the 5 years. And yet, this might sound crazy to you because you're thinking, you know what, I can't really compare myself to a billion-dollar company. However, a billion-dollar company typically only has, in their master plan, their vision only goes out to 10 years because so much changes in terms of your pests, so your political, economic, social, and technology, especially now in terms of technology. And so much changes on your own internal strengths that when you combo all of that together, basically you don't want to have an outlook longer than 10 years. And it's hard to plan and execute to longer than 10 years. So figure out where you want to be in the next 3 years as a startup, 5 years as a small business, and if you're a huge mega company, you still only have a 10-year outlook. So here's some examples of visions, and maybe you can use these to compare whether or not this makes sense for you. So first, if you're a dentist, the busiest dental clinic or client list in the city. If you're an accountant, you could actually say what you want your total revenues to be for a year, and that's good enough. For Small Business Solver, our vision is actually in the next 5 years to become the most trusted small business advisory in the world. Coca-Cola, so now we're going on the extreme, really huge. Their vision is actually to be the largest beverage company in the world. So that includes coffee and water. They extended themselves through their vision beyond merely carbonated drinks, which is why they went into the water and things like that. And finally, TK. They're the largest oil and gas marine transporter. TK is a $7 billion asset transportation company. So they're huge. And they only had a 10-year goal. They hit it in 10 years and then came up with their next vision. Typically a vision should be something that you definitely don't think that you can actually reach, and it's more of a stretch goal. It's something that your company is always striving for. So once you have your vision, the next step is to create bites. So pieces and more manageable pieces. And you want to break up how to get to your vision in years, quarters, months, weeks, and then days. And this is probably the best way to do it, is first you want to start with the years. So what we have here is an example of Small Business Solver. So this is actually my own strategic plan. I've changed it slightly, but this is pretty close to what I'm looking at. So if our vision is the most trusted small business advisory in the world, if we looked at 2012, we penetrated a lot of Canada, both the governments as well as chambers. So in 2013, in terms of expansion, if we want to in the next 5 years be the world, the next year you have to focus on bigger. So 2013 will be all about United States and Canada. So if you break this down into quarters, you then go, okay, so how do you reach them? For us, we reach out to associations, more governments, more chambers of commerce, and universities. And so although we're going to have to be working on all areas at all times, it's always nice to have a focus for each of your quarters. Based on something like this, we now turn them into more quantifiable goals. So if we start, and what we want them to be is SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. If they're specific and measurable, you know whether or not you've hit them. If they're achievable and realistic, you actually have more motivation. And then timely, of course, having a specific set time to reevaluate and monitor and control what you're doing. So the examples, just because I had to do my own strategic planning for 2013, would be our associations. Our SMART goal would be arbitrarily, let's say we want 200,000 members of associations. So you can see we actually made it very specific. We made it quantifiable and measurable. We have a number to how big of our customers or clients we want them to be. Governments, we want 20 states or provinces. Again, it's quantifiable. I know by the end of 2013 if I hit it or if I didn't hit it. And what's nice about these numbers, if you go in by the quarters, you can actually divide by 4 and say, okay, so in my first quarter, I have to have 50,000 members. By my first quarter, I should probably have 5 states. And you have to figure out whether or not you're actually on track to hit your own numbers. Once you have it in your quarters, you actually need to break it down even further. So quarters or months is how you can do it. And what I'm going to do is this spreadsheet that you're seeing right now, I'm actually going to post a template if anybody wishes to use it the same way. And the way that we actually do our monitoring to make sure that things are done is that each single week we have a goal. And the goal should always be tied to our strategy. And it's not saying that every single day you have to do something strategic. The whole idea is that each week you should have moved forward somewhere strategically. So when you have that one strategy or goal to get done, you make sure one of the days you've actually added it in. And the whole idea is if you haven't finished that strategic initiative in that week to move you forward, you can't stop working. So as a small business owner, maybe you're done working at Friday at noon, but maybe you're not done working until Saturday evening. So the whole idea is that you have to stay true to what these strategic goals are, because it's a strategy that's going to help you reach your vision. So first thing that we have here is I basically have all the morning and afternoon, and this is for more of a solopreneur, and then your strategy and making sure that it's done. But of course, each of your employees could have their own strategic and performance initiatives that they have to reach. One question that came out from the registrants is how to make this more fun. And really, the way that I like to make it fun is that when I reach my strategic initiative each week, or let's say at the end of each month, and if I hit my goals, I definitely reward myself. I think it's very important to reward yourself. It can be as simple as going out for dinner with a friend. It could be, I don't know, getting your hair cut. It could be just you're able to go for that jog because you've done the work that you had to get done that day or that week or that month. So that's one thing, is definitely the reward side. And also, it's a sense of accomplishment. It's almost like a checklist that you get to cross it off and you finish it. The other thing is really because you've done strategic planning, you realize that when you finish that small little strategy that you had to do that week, it's adding up to your entire vision of where you see your company going. So even keeping that in mind, I mean, personally, I think that that's fun because I know now I'm reaching my 5-year goal, which is pretty cool. And so now this is an example as well of how you could actually roll it out if you wanted to. So you don't have to do this by day. You could do this by week, but making sure that at least you have a strategic goal each week, because if you don't know or have a plan of how to get there, you're not actually going to have done this. So for us, if our Q1 was an association, we better follow up with our hot lead associations in the first week of this year, because as we know, sales can take 3 to 6 months. So you have to get all this stuff going sooner rather than later. Once you have your vision and you put it into bite-sized morsels for you to chew up, the next thing is to monitor it. So because we created SMART goals, so they were specific, measurable, and timely, what happens is that we can tell at any given time, so monthly, quarterly, or even weekly, whether or not we're on target. So again, making sure that your SMART goals are sales related, cost, revenues, even marketing tasks, and that you're moving ahead, making sure you can then double check. And any time that your sales or your costs or your revenues are off, you have to make sure that you're able to tweak it. So improve what can be improved upon. Stop doing things that aren't working, because time is money. And always remember that the true definition of insanity is doing the same things and expecting different results. So because we create SMART goals, we can measure whether or not something's working, and if it's not working, you must tweak it. So the wrap up. Start with your vision. We talked about the BHAG. We talked about SMART goals. Then break it up into bite-sized pieces. That's your annual goals, your quarterly goals, your monthly goals, your weekly goals. And if you're detail-oriented, you can do what I've done is daily goals. And then you need to monitor and tweak it. As a wrap-up, remember, a good strategy plus great execution is all you need. At this point, I'm going to open it up for questions and stop recording. I don't know if there were any questions that have arise from this so